everything evolves, right? If you think about, the civil rights movement in the United States started in the 1960s, we're evolving. We're now in the 2020s, right? So what are we doing 60 years? If we're doing the same thing then, we're doing it wrong, right? Because everything has changed. The principle remains the same, but we have to learn. We have to evolve and learn and evolve and learn, and united we stand, divided we fall, and there will be people who want to divide you. Social justice, if everyone wanted social justice, we would have social justice. Social justice benefits many of us, the majority of us. As 80% of the world's population are people of color. We're treated as minorities, but we are the people of the global majority. The global South, the population. If social justice benefit, if it benefited the most, which it will do, then we would be fine. But there are many people and places that's not going to benefit them. So you are going to be up against money, power, and money and power don't like to get policed.
So I'm here with Liana in Bermuda. We're going to talk about social justice. Liana, I'm really, really happy to have you here in windy, slightly rainy Bermuda, but hopefully you'll be able to have a chat which isn't as stormy, and a really good conversation about who you are, what you do, and your advice and tips and wisdom with the students here at School of Social Justice. It would be great to learn a bit about what you're trying to do. Right now you're trying to tell stories of folk whose stories haven't been told, but also you're an artist, a campaigner, background in political campaigning. What does social justice mean to you?
For me, social justice is in everything I do. It's like a core principle of how I operate in the world, and so it means I carry those principles in absolutely everything I do. So from who I work with and how I work with them, from how I engage in social settings or in professional settings, it's just been entrenched in me from such a young age, because my dad was a social justice warrior, and so I've always known that essentially I'm always here for the underdog, for the underrepresented, which tend to be black and brown people on a racial level, and then obviously people who are marginalized for other reasons of identity.
Amazing. I mean, the fact that you call your dad a social justice warrior and say that proudly, some folk use that term in a derogatory way. Why are you proud to say that, your dad was a social justice warrior and not afraid to say that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think because I grew up with it, and also I saw the sacrifices he made and that we made, and he died young because of it.
Okay,
right?
What happened?
Like he essentially was sort of this great black hope for Bermuda. He had been a really poor boy. Like he didn't grow up with any money, and he was never expected to do that well. And academically, he did really, really well. And when he came to Bermuda, he was an incredible lawyer. Like at the age of 26, he took a case to the Privy Council in the UK and won it, which is phenomenal. But he joined a political party that wasn't aligned with what he really wanted, which was for the working people of Bermuda to have rights, to progress. Segregation, we only had desegregation in 1959 in Bermuda following a theater boycott. So my dad was born in 1950, which means he grew up in segregated Bermuda, and he always felt that there was an unfairness and inequity about the way Bermuda existed. And so he decided he was going to do whatever it took to change that. And what happened was when he switched sides, and essentially the way he switched political sides was we had the last hangings, or the last executions on British soil anywhere in the world happened in Bermuda in 1977. And he was representing the men who were hung alongside another incredible lawyer and social justice warrior. And when those men were hung and Bermuda went to 3 days of race riots, my dad could no longer stay on what he felt was the side of the oppressor, and he switched political sides. The result of that was essentially a targeted campaign to dismantle him. Economically assassinated, there were 12 attempts to disbar him. And essentially, what I would say is the trauma of that, which he then fought his whole life against, were just unfair, irrational attempts to discredit him, malign him. He became a member of parliament at some point. That trauma, as well as being a trauma of a black boy in an anti-black world, collectively, I would say, led to his early death at the age of 59.
I mean, that's an amazing story, and I think, the idea of someone standing up for something and putting their life at risk, but also, I mean, for you growing up in that household, so many of us are so kind of shaped by our parents and our sort of period of growing up in where we did. I mean, what were the big lessons you learned from him in terms of what it took you know, to do what he did?
I would say my dad had this reputation of calling a spade, right?
Okay.
He was someone who, similarly to Malcolm X, when he was speaking, people hadn't spoken like him. And again, Martin Luther King, people hadn't had the courage to speak out. So my dad definitely taught me that he would call a thing. He would say outright what was going on. He didn't cover it in, you know, discreet language. If he saw racism, he called it out. If he saw inequality, he called it out. And it was very difficult to manipulate him or others around him because he would speak it. And I think so much of the time now, like a friend recently wrote me about sort of Africans and Indians in Ukraine who are being essentially not prioritized, not helped out of the country in the middle of the bombing. And she's a white person. She said, what can I do? And I said, well, firstly, you know, for most of 2020, we see people posting Black Lives Matters flags there, you know, like a lot of things on social media. I was like, but that's now stopped. So you can just keep being as vocal as you decided to be then. Like, I think the first thing is speaking out, and everyone can do that. It doesn't require you to change that, like your life in any way. It just requires you to add to your social media posts or add to the conversations you're having with people. When someone says something where you're like, that doesn't feel right to me. And then say what's happening. So that's definitely the first.
For people who want to speak out but don't necessarily have the courage or are inherently, they feel like they're shy. I mean, what advice do you have them? Because many people who would be at the school are really passionate, but they might not have had taken that step, that first step. I mean, what is needed and necessary to take that sort of first step to call things out?
So I would also say that it's important to know that everyone is different, right? And not everyone can be MLK. Not everyone can be Malcolm X, right? Because they had a particular skill set. But they did not exist on their own. They had a family of people, a group of people. And so if you're finding that you're like, I don't have the courage yet to speak out myself, you can support organizations. And for me, I've always been involved in grassroots organizations and grassroots organizing. Even when I was politically campaigning, my biggest interest was like, what do the people need and want? And you can do that. We have people who would go around and actually speak to people one-on-one. So you're not actually having to be the verbal sort of out there, outspoken one. But if you join an organization that then is saying, you know, let's find out what, you know, people really need. And then you're filtering that back up to people who are willing to be vocal or can make a difference. You know, that's when, again, like political lobbying comes in, right? Not everyone's going to be in the position to talk to their MP or feel okay about that, right? But they can be in a position to talk to their family or their friends and look around and go, things just aren't right here. What can I do?
Got it. I mean, for you, you are though an example of a leader. You know, I've been here for a month now in Bermuda, and all the different contexts I've seen you, whether it be you showcasing your artwork and, you know, all of the things that went into that piece of art in the gallery, your speech and your presentation at the sort of business session where you're setting up a business to tell stories for people, for profit. What are the top skills you needed to do all of this range of stuff, which has basically made you a representative of you as a leader? What are the skills that
Okay,
people
so
need to
I would
develop?
say firstly, it's like a stronger sense in myself. But that doesn't come through just myself. It comes through community. I don't believe it's possible for a leader to be a true leader without community, without a sense of community liberation. So, like, you know, no man is an island. I think that's completely true, right? Like, I had great mentors from this program, the Force program. I have a partner at home who's very supportive. I have, you know, I surround myself with people who I support and they support me. And I also realize there's so much of the world pulls you this way or that way, right? So mental health, huge. I have to prioritize my mental health. So that could mean, like, you know, I've had too many people's voices at me for a while. I need to shut off social media for like a day or two, put my phone on airplane mode.
Which you did on Sunday.
Which I did on Sunday.
Yeah,
tech-free Sunday. That's like glorious.
That's it,
And it allows me to remember, who am I? What am I doing this for? Because again, when I stand up and I give a talk that's well received, or I speak about what I'm interested in, it's very easy for anyone's ego to say, well, that's me. You know, look how amazing I am. And it's not me. Like, that's a power much bigger than me. It's because I'm talking from a place where I know I'm not just doing something for me. I like have a purpose. So, you know, I think a lot of people, I'd say there's that inner voice. When someone wants to get involved in social justice, there's a lot of people who here are wanting to do that. Something is calling you. What's calling you? What's that voice? What's your purpose? And a lot of it, I think, is sitting there and going, what's my purpose?
how did you discover your purpose? Was it mainly through your dad, or did you have your own journey?
Yeah, I definitely had my own journey. So I always, I'm wearing like a very Star Wars oriented shirt.
Okay, yeah.
Coming over to the Dayak side, the Dayaks being my mother's people in Borneo. And, I always wanted to make movies.
Okay.
Right? As a kid, like, I always wanted to, but I never saw myself in those roles, right? And I saw my dad, and I always I want to be a lawyer, but I want to play a lawyer on TV. I still became a lawyer. I don't practice law, but I still became a lawyer. I want to do this, and I did that as a backup plan before going to drama school. I then went to drama school. So my mother and father were like, yeah, you're a great actress, but class, I would say most, we're a black and Asian family. Yeah. I would say all of my friends in the Caribbean, a lot of my friends who are sort of underrepresented, the minority dream essentially is what we can be called. It's like you be an accountant, you be a lawyer, you do these things. And there's that idea of that's where stability comes from, have stability and safety and then do what you want to do. And so I followed that for a while, but it didn't bring me stability or safety. It actually brought me unsafety because I didn't feel safe in what I really wanted to do or who I wanted to be. And so I had to really go, I know my parents and my family are saying, and teachers are saying the things that they believe is the best thing for me.
Yeah.
They believe the best thing is to become a lawyer, and that's your extracurricular thing, right? Yeah. But I had to at one point say, they have their path and I have mine. And mine is always going to be art, storytelling, writing, anything that's storytelling based is, I realize that's where my power comes from in order to essentially liberate Black and brown people around the world.
Amazing. I can't wait to see sort of all of the creative things that you're going to show and develop and publish. It is a rainy day, and there are rainy days when you sometimes try to figure out, are we doing what we really want to do? There's a lot of students out there who are figuring out, there's flashy lights in the tech sector. Lots of people want to be the next startup entrepreneur. A lot of people want to be movie stars, but maybe there's that thing where somebody actually just wants to volunteer and then become a professional, caseworker for a charity, a political campaigner for a candidate you really believe in. I mean, you did a lot of these roles,
right?
And I think, for me, what I find fascinating is the fact that I feel all of these parts made you who you are. What do you say to people who are trying to figure out what path to take?
I think it's something interesting because I don't think you can make a wrong choice.
Okay.
Because a wrong choice will still redirect you to the right choice, So many times, should I or shouldn't I? Well, eventually we tend to get quite settled and go, this feels more right. But there's something I always tell to myself, which is nothing is permanent. Nothing is permanent. Even if you choose a path, I had a law degree, I took the New York bar. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
There's no wrong path, because even when you step on the wrong one, the right one will be clear, because the wrong one is so clearly wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, I spent, before trying to set up the school, 2 years figuring out, do I want to be a tech startup person? And I just realized that's just not me. And I think that we sometimes swear, but we end at that center of gravity, which I feel like once you found that, sticking by it is really important. I mean, for you, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced? Because I mean, there's obviously so many forms of social injustice that you're trying to tackle, from lack of representation, misrepresentation, racism, the lack of cultural diversity in certain places, in certain buildings, in certain rooms. Tell us a bit about kind of...
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? There's from microaggressions to macroaggressions, And I'll also say there's something that sort of my spiritual guide, he's a Babalawo, an Ifa priest, he says something, which is, a lot of the time people think when it's their path, it's going to be easy. It's just going to, the doors are just going to open, right? Yeah. This is the sign that it's my path. But again, Martin Luther King, they didn't just open the bridge for him, Edmund Pettus Bridge. They didn't just go, oh, you know what, you go along, we're going to hold the dogs back. Like, no worries, come on through. Like, he had a purpose and a path, and it was very difficult, and there were a lot of barriers to that, right? Yeah. And so for me, like, there are times when you think this is just so hard, and that's why self-care has to be so high up there. Because if I have a belief in myself, like, I might have setbacks, but they're not going to be, like, devastating, right? And if I think, oh, well, one no, one no means no, I better quit and change and quit and change. And I think Octavia Butler, Audre Lorde, they used to rejection letters from being published, right? Like rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter.
I do the same. I pin it up on the wall.
Yeah, and you use the fuel, right? You use it as fuel because you know, especially when you're black and brown or you're underrepresented in some way, LGBTQ, you know that the way things are set up aren't for you. And so actually, if someone says no, it's like, no for you. But it's going to be yes for someone who needs this or needs to hear it, who wants to hear it. And I'll even say, you know, there's a saying, you know, to a lot of black people hear it, which is that like, you're going to have to try twice as hard to get half as much.
That's exactly what my mentor and my former employer, David Lammy, the MP for Tottenham, now Shadow Minister for Justice, used to say when I used to work for him. And it really stuck with me, and I think pushed me to work so hard to do everything that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. And I mean, for you, do you have an example of, you know, a social injustice or issue or problem or policy thing which you tried to address, whether it be like, this thing came up, I wanted to amend it, that wasn't right, or we're going to do a protest. You know, how did you see this problem? What happened? And then how did you try to solve it? What challenges did you face and what happened in the end?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
Loads.
I'm trying to think of two examples come up at the top of my head, and they're very political.
Okay.
So the first one was when I was Chief Public Relations Officer for the Bermuda Progressive Labour Party. We were the opposition at the time, and there was a plan to put in a new airport, the new airport that you've now flown into.
Yeah.
Now, the party who was in government at the time were not giving out very many details about the government the deal. It's still been financially difficult for Bermuda. And the position, especially on a Labour government side, the position was we don't privatize, you know, these sort of things. And our people were very against the deal. And so at one point, we had a lot of town rallies. We held a lot of rallies. We really galvanized our people to come out and say, like, we're not okay with this because you're essentially selling off a piece of Bermuda for the next 30 years and you're not giving us enough details about it. Yeah. What then happened was we protested at the House of Assembly and that turned violent. We were like, they sent the police.
Tell us a bit about the protest though. So you all gathered in a room. Like for people who don't even know how to
protest?
Oh,
like, okay.
So you met in a room.
Right.
And I mean, did you WhatsApp people? Did you call people? Did you email them?
So we would first hold town halls. Right?
Okay.
Or even before, let's go before the town halls. Like how would you organize the people who were organizing it? So before even the town hall, which becomes public and it's an invite to people to attend, you know, we would get together and we would talk WhatsApp.
And who's
we WhatsApped a lot.
The people you trust? This is the people in the party?
Yeah, the people in the party, or even people who are just supporters, but people who really feel a certain way, and we know they do. There's something in the Labour Party which has been called, you know, in the Labour Party here, the kitchen cabinet.
Okay.
So you have your cabinet, which is the public cabinet, but then the kitchen cabinet are the people you trust who are sitting around your kitchen table and talking to you.
Interesting.
If you're in my kitchen cabinet, I trust you with my life. You are loyal. I know we have the same principles. I trust you with my life. So we start small and we make sure we're all aligned. And
2 or 3, 5 people.
Five people.
Okay.
And we know we're going to have disagreements. I think the other thing is also to remember we are all individuals with different interests, with different, you know, with different goals. We're all often going to have different, not necessarily a collective aim that's the same, but maybe different approaches. Yeah. And when you understand that you're going to have disagreements and you walk in there and you say, you know, it's not personal, it's not even political, it's the nature of humanity. But if you could keep bringing it around to the aim, the final aim, and then as a smaller group, you decide, what's our next step? Okay. Let's send out an email list, see who's interested in this, get people to sign up via email.
And that's what happened once you started reaching out.
For this one in particular, we didn't have to because it's part of the party, right? Okay. And so the party already had supporters, email lists, an ability to go out. But so just to give the example of, say you're starting, right? And you don't know how to galvanize people at all, right? You need to find out who's like-minded, who's going to be interested. So you put out feelers and you collect an email list. And your email list above social media is going to be the most important because as we know, Instagram can go down. How many times have Instagram gone down and people are like, I can't contact my people? Also, there's shadow banning on social media sites. You know, you talk too much about racial injustice, trans lives, you're going to get shadow banned. And so the key is to get the email addresses of people who are very interested and phone numbers. So you can do text, you can do WhatsApp, and you can do email. Because that's not controlled outside of your email list, right? And then from there, town halls. You know, in a COVID safe way, or in non-COVID times.
And a town hall is simply people meeting in a place. And what happens? So you have a general schedule of how this takes place?
Yeah, so exactly. So we would have like a town hall or a few town halls, right? And we would rally people. So you'd go to town halls in different areas and you bring it to people.
So you go out into the neighborhoods and you reach out to maybe local leaders and say, we're about to talk about
exactly.
Care about. Okay.
Exactly.
And how do you run one of those? Like, because there's a lot of people who you might not have ever met before. They might have been views which are totally opposed to you. What are the best practices for a town hall?
I feel transparency and allowing people to have a voice. So while you have a structured ability for people to ask questions, censorship is death, right? So you need to know that when you're opening up a town hall and you're going to have a structure for people to ask questions, you have timed questions, timed answers, and it is equal across the board, whether that's a question you like or a question you dislike. Because otherwise people will say, well, they have an agenda. Well, of course we have an agenda. Social justice is our agenda.
Yeah.
But I also have to understand that my beliefs might not be the same as someone else's belief. And because we are in this algorithm of divisiveness, we are constantly fighting against that to stay united. And I think really importantly, what often happens in organizations is that, well, that person disagreed with me on that, so he's my enemy now. She's my enemy now. She doesn't understand what we're doing here. But it's like constantly keeping dialogue open. You know, because the fact is, a lot of the time with grassroots, even politically, people are working for free. I was working for free for months, you know?
And working really hard, long hours.
Hard, long hours, and people can feel taken advantage of, they can feel disregarded, they can feel, because we're human, you know? And I think it's all about like, even when, I think the best leaders are someone who know, I am a leader, but I am a leader to be here with it. I'm not even here to lead you. I'm here to convey the ideas that we've created collectively to more people, because that just happens to be my skill set or my inherent sort of, you know, zone of genius or excellence, right? Whereas someone else's is the organizing. Yeah. You know?
I mean, for me, one of the toughest parts of any sort of public gathering in a sort of democratic society is when there's a big, strong disagreement. One which is based on principles of each side diametrically opposed to each other, and there seems to be no way of getting out of it, and then it can get personal, it can get hurtful, it can get painful, and it could lead to people going through a lot of mental health issues because of that. I mean, have you seen that in your work, and if so, like how do we need to try and address that, or is that just the part of
I think that is the future of social justice work, frankly. The like mental health focus and like
to address it, not
like as in there are going to be disagreements, but this idea that we become political, or it becomes like this one leader we're all following, right, to the detriment of anything else. I think that's, you know, everything evolves, right? If you think about, you know, the civil rights movement in the United States started in the 1960s, we're evolving. We're now in the 2020s, right? So what are we doing 60 years? If we're doing the same thing then, we're doing it wrong, right? Because everything has changed. The principle remains the same, but we have to learn. We have to evolve and learn and evolve and learn, and united we stand, divided we fall, and there will be people who want to divide you. Social justice, if everyone wanted social justice, we would have social justice. Social justice benefits many of us, the majority of us. As you know, 80% of the world's population are people of color. We're treated as minorities, but we are the people of the global majority. You know, the global south, the population. If social justice it benefited the most, which it will do, then we would be fine. But there are many people and places that's not going to benefit them. So you are going to be up against money, power, and money and power don't like to get reduced, right? And I think it's very interesting too to watch when even someone in a social justice space then has power, how they can shift. They can change. An example of that? I can't without naming names, so I will, because I'm not divisive. But I will say that's one of the reasons I think there needs to be very transparency and clearness all the way through, and even with organizations, succession planning. You know, succession planning within an organization. When a leader comes in and says, well, how long do you want to do this for? I'm not sure. I'm, and constantly listening. Once you stop listening, I don't know how much time it's going to be until you're no longer the leader, but your time is up.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, listening is such a crucial part of any form of leadership, but also work. And I feel like you're somebody who I see observing and listening and taking things in, but also then able to share the wisdom you've shared or you've learnt. I mean, for you with the students at the school, do you have any pieces of wisdom or advice, particularly those who are just kind of starting? They might even just attended the first protest. They might have signed their first petition. What does a life after that look like, and kind of how do you get good at that? I mean, you shared some bits, but it would be great to learn a bit more about kind of the hard skills. You talked about presenting, listening. Do you have any kind of sort of skills at which you recommend people should?
So first I have a piece of advice, which is don't burn out too quickly.
Okay.
Because what happens is, say you've gone to your first protest, we feel galvanized. You want to use that energy, you feel galvanized. And my dad used to say, and it wasn't his quote, it was from someone else, first you learn, then you earn, then you serve. Now, learn, serve. And there's a reason for that, right? The earning part is because what happens when someone is in a very difficult place financially, they become sort of lured into the idea of financial reward or financial promise, or therefore sort of susceptible to what happened a lot in Bermuda back in the day, where mortgages were pulled. Okay. So black people would get a mortgage for a house and they would pull the mortgage, or they would pull the loan if you started speaking up, right?
What?
Yes. Huge issues.
Was that even legal? But it just, they did it anyway.
But the people who owned the bank didn't want you speaking up, right? And we had recently had a commission about historic land thefts and mortgage issues. This just was last year, I believe, on the historic land thefts of Bermuda, right? Because, if someone can beat you, if they're not better than you, if they can't beat you, if they can't silence you, they will assassinate you in some way or the other. And it doesn't necessarily these days end up with a bullet like it did with Malcolm or Martin, right?
Okay,
it ends up with economic assassination, reputational assassination. How can I take down your reputation? How can I cut off your income? How can I stop you from being able to support your family? How can I get you canceled? How can I make a call that means that you will no longer work in this town? What can I do to take you out if I can't beat you and I can't kill you, right? And so that's why I'd say don't burn out too quickly, learn it, get it. There are going to be sacrifices. Malcolm said, this is a time for martyrs, but I believe that time is over. I don't believe we still need to be martyrs. Unfortunately, there will be real issues that you come across, that are difficult and hard to manage. And what I'll also say is, when you start opening up your eyes, you can't unsee things, Like, it's the Matrix. Yeah. You can't, when you start seeing injustice anywhere, you start seeing injustice everywhere. Yeah. And so then you want to get involved in everything. And that is a surefire way to burn yourself out and not be of use to anyone. Yeah. So my first advice is, when you find out what the principles are that are most important to you, what an issue is that's most important to you, don't spread yourself too thin, right? Like, don't spread yourself too thin, because we want to do everything. Because
we've talked a lot in the school in the past about burnout and making sure we take care of ourselves, because when there's a lot of people who care about something, often it comes from trauma, past traumatic experiences, and then when you've got a room of people, each of whom has a lot of trauma, in that room there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of things to deal with collectively. But this idea of being assassinated by your enemies, or people want to bring you down, not through death or assassination, but I mean, how do you cope with that? How do you cope with where people telling you, defamatory comments, trying to bring you down on social media, making up lies and stories? How do people survive that? Because it's very tough.
I'd say community. So for example, and I'll give you a specific, you asked for an example around like my dad and everything. So my partner and I talk about this a lot. My partner's father was a black journalist in Bermuda, and he was essentially opposed to the same person my father was. We didn't know each other back then. We were kids, right? Like, I didn't know him. Our dads probably knew each other, but we didn't. Yeah. My dad was specifically standing up for the premier at the time, Sir David Gibbons, one of the richest men in the Commonwealth, a white man who was one of the richest men in the Commonwealth at the time. My partner's father did the same thing. And And what happened is I've told you the story of my father. My partner's father, his job was taken. Anytime he then tried to get any other work, within 2 days, a phone call would come in and the person would say, I'm sorry, I can't hire you anymore. It's you or me, right? Like if I hire you, I'm cut off. And that happened so much until my partner's father could no longer work in Bermuda and had to leave the island and leave my partner and his family here. And he later died by suicide. So when we talk about, we already have trauma. And then on top of the trauma, we have people who are trying to tear us down. And my partner and I talk about it a lot. Like, how will we withstand this? How will we not? My father became an addict. His father died by suicide. How will we not become what they've become, right? Because of the trauma becomes too much. And I've seen it now in community. So I have friends, especially in California, who were Panther babies or babies of Panther babies. So again, Black Panthers. COINTELPRO came along and tried to dismantle them first. But a second way they did it is what we call the drop. The drop of crack cocaine into Black neighborhoods, right? That was like the final thing that was going to take out everyone. So if you're not looking at your addiction, issues in your family, if you're not looking at your own personal trauma, there's always a way that you're going to come down. And so, as I explained about my company, we're making stories, making books and movies to educate, entertain, and empower people of color. But the B Corps side of that, the for good part of the for-profit, for good model, is that we're going to set up trauma healing centers, rehab centers for addiction, mental illness, and trauma for Black and brown people. Because I don't think you can have that conversation in a silo. I don't think you can say, well, I can just withstand this. And what I have found the best thing is my partner and I decided that we do it by doing it together, and not just the two of us, but we do it by staying in community with other people who are also committed to the same thing. And that where one goes, we all go, right? Like, I am not, even if I might appear on a social justice podcast alone, I am not alone. I'm not alone.
Who are the people that are around you that, apart from your partner? When I met you and your partner, I knew there was this unshakable bond, which even just in a few moments, I could just tell it was something to be admired. Who are the other people around you? You know, who are your advisors? Who are your mentors? Who are your supporters? You know, how, for people who are trying to figure out who are the 5 people I want to spend the most time with to be the best person I can be, like who are the people you tend to surround yourself with? Yeah, so I think it's also, again, like the idea of like, how do you find those people? It's well and good to just say, I need these people, but how do I find them? Especially if maybe around you people aren't doing social justice work, right? So I definitely use mentors for sure. And what I'll find is that if someone is interested in social justice, or even interested in social justice from the part of their own business, right? Like, I will go out to them. So I have men and women and gender nonconforming people who are older than me, who have been through things. You know, my father is dead. I don't have him anymore. So when he died and I felt like I lost a compass point, I sought out people who reminded me of him, who were as committed to social justice, and was like, basically, I didn't say, will you take me under your wing? I kind of like put myself under it, and then, you know, so I'll say just definitely older. But just with that, because like I feel like I get tingles. I've got just a couple of things you said, because you know my father passed away when I was 9 years old. He was a waiter in a hotel. He wasn't really active voluntarily. He was an immigrant who came to the country to earn money and send money back to the Philippines. My mum was working in a casino at the time. And so when he passed away, like I had loads of potential influences, some of which were very bad, but then my education showed me people like the heroes that we talked about today, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, but also, you know, Jose Rizal, a Filipino national hero. But what was interesting is that also when people heard my story, they wanted to help. And I think that's why what you're doing is so important, because if our stories are not told, nobody will know what the untold stories are all about. And I think I'm really glad that we're able to share your story, because I'm sure many folk who watch this are going to be inspired to go on and tell their stories, because it leads to what you know, all the things you've said now. And you were about to say something about.
So just, you know, that same thing, exactly. When someone hears your story, they want to help. And if they don't want to help, they're not for your kitchen cabinet, right? like you will find when you're open and generous with yourself, there will be people who are open and generous with you. So just like I have mentors, I have mentees, right? If someone comes to me and genuinely wants some guidance and are also willing to do the work, because what I find is I will work so hard and I will work very hard for someone else, but you've got to be equally committed to doing the work for yourself and for others, right? And then, you know, again, I'll find my friendship groups. There are people who feel like sisters to me who aren't sisters. I have my 2 sisters who I love and adore and who are, again, wonderful supports, but people who are sisters or brothers, siblings, who aren't, who just, we are so aligned that I know I have their corner and they have mine. And those are people who are lawyers, some are poets, some are filmmakers, some are, you know, football players, you know, they're different things. And I think also, you know, one thing about storytelling, right? Fred Hampton, Black Panther, he was 19 when he, you know, like 19 when he started out, very young, early 20s. And we lost so many people when they were so young, right? But it shows you when people discount young people, they really discount something major. Because when you're young, your understanding of what is right and what is wrong is so wonderful that one of the best things you can do, even if you're 20s or if you're in your 30s or if you're in your 40s and you're only just getting into social justice work, talk to the children in your life. Like the really little children who are very like, this doesn't seem right. And what's their inner voice? The teenagers in your life and how they feel about things, you know. My little brother is 18.
Okay.
And he's just left here and he's a fresher at Southampton. So he's in the UK. So again, you know, what's happening in different generations that are around you in your life.
That's really helpful because, as you say, youth and youth movements have been so crucial to not only bringing people out, but also as you say, seeing something so clearly and being in a way naive. You know, when we were young activists, we were so naive about what it took to really make a difference. But when we were like, well, no, it can't be like this, so we're going to try it. And I think that bit about just trying is something which, you know, you've done throughout your career and actually made a difference. Before we go, because I know time is running out. Of course, as I mentioned, this is the School of Social Justice. We are, you know, a very small school, but we hope to grow and to reach a lot more people. For folk who kind of might only meet you once, and they want to follow in your footsteps, and try to address some of the biggest social injustices of our time, whether it be racism, sexism, health inequities, economic inequality. What is one thing you want to leave with them? The one thing they should remember as they embark on this journey to trying to change the world? Yeah.
I think the one thing that I have to say is that whatever your principles are, take that into everything you do. So when you talk to your waiter at a restaurant, to when you talk to the head of your company, if you believe in social justice, then you have to live it and breathe it in everything that you do. I don't want to see someone mistreating a server. If you're for social justice, you're not mistreating a server, you're not mistreating a cleaner, you're not being dismissive of someone on the street, you're remembering, and this is what I do when I used to be in the tube in London, right? I would often just pause and look at each person and be like, they have a full, just like me, they have a full whole life. And so interestingly, when we talk about Black and brown people and issues, and it's easy to start being like, I hate white people, you know? And the thing is, it's actually not white people. I have a lot of white friends. I hate whiteness. But because the fact is, if you removed all white people from the world, we'd still have whiteness, right? We would still have essentially the effects of colonialism. You know, the effects of colonialism, the classism, because in the absence, you see it in the UK, in the absence of race, there is class discrimination. There is going to be discrimination in some way. And so again, it can become this us versus them, right? And what I do is I remember any person who is really annoying me, who does not have the same beliefs that I do. I have to remember there is something that's driving them. There is something, love, fear, whatever. There is something that's driving them, and they are a full, whole person just like myself. And they deserve their full wholeness. I don't have to agree with you, but you're still a human to me, regardless. And we're just going to leave it at that, you know? But I don't ever do something where it's like, I discount or disregard you
Yeah.
because you don't look like me or agree with me.
Liana, that is a wonderful way to end this conversation. I just want to say a huge thank you for showing us a way and a lifetime of commitment to social justice. You know, I've been here for a month and I've met so many amazing people, but for you and particularly for people at the school, like, you represent what we're trying to be. You know, you moved a lot of people to tears. And you moved Kirk, one of the people who I've never seen kind of get emotional when you were talking about your piece and what it meant in the art gallery. And today you just shared so much about your story, but also the lessons you've learnt. And we can't wait to see where you go. So keep on moving.
Thank you.
Keep on showing us the way. Keep on bringing people with you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. All right, peace. Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you who have become monthly supporters of the School of Social Justice. Your monthly contributions make a huge difference and allow us to deliver content which is educational and teaches people how to make a difference. If you want to become a patron as well, it's really simple. All you've got to do is go to the schoolofsocialjustice.com website, then click supporters and choose how much you want to contribute, whether it be £20 a month, a £5 a month or a £10 a month. Let's go with a £10 a month. It's really simple. Put in your details, put in your card number, click pay now, and you become a supporter. Whilst £5 a month is not much individually, it makes a huge difference collectively. And if we get 2,000 patrons, we can independently deliver content to you every single week to help ensure that we fulfill this mission of training the next generation of Martin Luther Kings. Thank you so much to all of you who've become patrons so far. You've made a huge difference and allowed us to continue with our work. And if you do become a patron, thank you so much. Your support means a lot. Take care. Bye.